My honourable friend is right that the olive harvest is also particularly important, both economically and culturally, for the Palestinian people. And we are clear that the settler violence must end. She will know that we have introduced sanctions as a result on particular Israeli ministers, as a result of some of the things that we have seen around the West Bank. We will continue to maintain pressure on action against the settler violence and also against illegal settlements in the West Bank.
Brian Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the statement, but why is the FCDO's atrocity prevention team not working with the Sudan team? Our briefing on El Fasher this morning gave a minimum estimate of 60,000 murdered thus far by the RSF in El Fasher, with bodies being buried by bulldozer. El Obeid is likely to be the next, and Tawila camp is expected to be attacked on Christmas Day. This is the worst human atrocity since Rwanda. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary need to call it out for what it is, mass murder, and engage with the UAE to see it stopped and trade ended if it is not. Thank you.
Like him, I am very worried about El Obeid and also Tawila as well, and preventing further atrocities. I have discussed the issues in Sudan and the huge humanitarian risks with the UAE and also with other members of the Quad as well. It is essential that we maintain the maximum pressure through the Quad and beyond from the whole international community as well. And I know that is something that the US, who are also part of the Quad, are extremely keen to do.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do thank the Foreign Secretary for the focus she's putting on Sudan. We certainly know from the horrific bloodshed in El Fasher that the RSF have got their sights, as we've heard, on Tawila and then onto Khartoum itself. We have got to stop those atrocities from occurring, and we know that it is being fuelled by the supply of weapons via the UAE, including Chinese drones and mercenaries which are coming through the UAE as well. Can she set out a bit more detail about the talk she's having with the UAE to stop their supply, which is fuelling this conflict?
Well, she's right that we need to ensure that the issues around the weapons, but it's also not just the weapons, it's also the pressure on the warring parties, as well as addressing issues around weapons supplies. So I have held discussions myself with all the members of the Quad, including with the UAE, also with the US, who are seeking to drive process around peace, and with Saudi and with Egypt as well. It's hugely important that all, but not just the Quad countries are involved in this, but also other countries, including neighbouring countries who have borders with Sudan, where we have seen issues around weapons being transferred, also including countries much more widely across the world as well, and that there is an international concerted effort, both around weapons, but also around the pressure on the warring parties to refrain, to abide by international law and to agree to the humanitarian truce.
Given that the next debate is very heavily subscribed, I just thought it would be helpful to members if I were to indicate I will finish this statement at about 3 o'clock. Kit Malthouse.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. I'm afraid the Foreign Secretary has neatly illustrated the problem with the British government's position in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. She mentioned the very welcome return of Israeli hostages, but no mention of the Palestinian detainees who've been returned to their families. She mentioned the return of the bodies of Israelis, but no mention of the dozens of bodies of Palestinians that have been returned to their families. And can she not see that until we value both people equally and bring accountability to both peoples, we will make very little progress in this appalling situation? So specifically, to avoid accusations of illegitimacy, how will the Palestinians be represented on this board of peace? Secondly, the UN resolution puts significant conditions on the Palestinians to ensure compliance. What conditions are being put on the Israeli government to ensure their compliance in this project? And thirdly, the situation in the West Bank, as the Honourable Lady behind her has said, is not just appalling, as the Foreign Secretary said in her statement, it's the worst it's ever been. Is she going to fall in the same trap as her predecessor of being all talk and doing the bare minimum to keep our own benches from open revolt, or is she going to step forward and actually bring accountability for the daily acts of violence and terrorism that are taking place?
Well, I just point out to him, obviously, this government is the first to take the historic decision to recognise the state of Palestine. Exactly because, for too long, successive governments have supported a two-state solution and yet only recognised one state. We believe it's the right thing to do to change that and to recognise the state of Palestine. It's why, too, we have been in continued discussion with the Palestinian Authority, who have welcomed the resolution, the UN resolution, and the peace process, and been involved in detailed discussions with the Arab states as well. He is right to talk about the detainees, those who have lost their lives, the tens of thousands of Palestinians who have lost their lives in Gaza as a result of the war over the last 2 years. It's also right that we recognise the huge damage that Hamas has done, including through their terrorist attack on October the 7th. We need to address all of the suffering that has taken place across Gaza and across the region, if we are to be able to bring people together to deliver a lasting peace. That is what I believe the current process is working to do, and is what we are working to do as part of it. This is going to be difficult and challenging ahead. It is going to be complicated, but we need to continue to do so.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the reports of thousands of civilians being prevented from fleeing El Fasher by the RSF and allied militias, what urgent steps is the government taking to ensure the safe humanitarian corridors are in place to support unimpeded access for aid agencies? It was a particular issue we heard this morning in the private briefing. And just on international backers, what more can we do to ensure that we're holding them to account, particularly the UAE, but across the region as well? Thanks.
Well, the UN Human Rights Council resolution that the UK drew up and that was passed on Friday does include the urgent need for humanitarian access, as well as the investigation of the atrocities and the ability to hold people to account. I think the other important issue is that the Quad, that includes the US but also the UAE and Saudi and Egypt, has now committed to the humanitarian truce, to a ceasefire, and also to ending to external support to warring parties. It's essential now that we all work to implement the commitment that the Quad has set out and ensure that there is huge international pressure to get that peace in place.
Brendan O'Hara.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this morning, as Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on International Law, Justice and Accountability, I hosted the briefing for parliamentarians on the crisis in Sudan, at which Nathaniel Raymond of the Humanitarian Search Lab at Yale described El Fasher as being a slaughterhouse where 60,000 people have been murdered in just 3 weeks. Those same Yale scholars now forecast that by Christmas, the RSF will be in Tawila, where hundreds of thousands of civilians could face a similarly appalling fate. But what has been missing, everybody agreed at the meeting, has been the Prime Minister's personal leadership on this issue. So will she encourage the Prime Minister to become personally involved and show that vitally important international leadership that could prevent Tawila becoming another slaughterhouse?
So not only am I worried about Tawila, I am also worried that the full scale of the atrocities in El Fasher may yet prove to be worse even than has been reported and commented on so far. So I am deeply, deeply worried about that. In terms of the Prime Minister's engagement with this, I would say to him is that when I was appointed to this role, and also previously in the months before before that, the Prime Minister had highlighted personally the importance of Sudan as being one of the central areas that we needed the UK government and the FCDO to focus on because of the scale of the atrocities, including the work to lead the London Sudan conference in April of this year. Before many people were raising concerns about Sudan, this government has been consistently highlighting the humanitarian risks, but the reality is that the situation is still getting worse and we need that international support for action.
Please, can I encourage members to ask short questions and short answers, please? Foreign Secretary Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her very strong and principled leadership about conflict resolution. On the International Stabilisation Force, I wonder if she can update us. She'll be very aware of the heavy rains and flooding that we've now seen in Gaza. She's absolutely right about the importance of getting food in, but there are reports that the Israelis are blocking mobile homes and tents. So can she say some more about what we're doing when they say that a dry night is a luxury? And just on this point about war crimes and investigation of war crimes, clearly the future of Gaza is also about a truth and reconciliation process. Will the ICF play any role in that, please?
So the first issue on the need for shelter, and this is particularly becoming acute as we move towards winter. And we know that some of the warehouses, for example, that I saw in Jordan have in them the winter supplies, including the tents, including shelter. And of course, there's going to be a much bigger reconstruction effort needed to properly restore homes for Palestinians across Gaza. We are continuing to urge the lifting of restrictions around some of the restrictions that are preventing the tents and equipment going in, and will continue to do so. And this is an issue that the CMCC, the Coordinating Committee, is also raising. She is right to raise issues around accountability, but she will also, I'm sure, agree that the most immediate issue is to ensure that the peace is in place, and the immediate task of the International Stabilisation Force will be to sustain and monitor peace in Gaza so that the IDF can withdraw from Gaza.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I very much welcome the Foreign Secretary's proactive statement, and I hope that will be the pattern of engagement with Parliament going forward. In addition to the horrendous atrocities that she and others have detailed, the World Food Programme have identified that 700,000 people face catastrophic hunger conditions in the coming months in Sudan. So we really do need that step change, but we need some evidence of it. So can she be clear that the exchanges with the UAE have been robust and that there are real efforts to engage the African Union?
So the honourable member is right to talk about the extreme hunger, the famine that is taking place. In fact, I've seen worse figures suggesting there are 8 million people at risk of famine in Sudan. That is the equivalent of the population of London. It's that many people who are at risk with serious food risks, and that is why he is right to talk about the issues in terms of the RSF and humanitarian access. I would just also say, though, that the SAF has also been restricting access for humanitarian aid and trying to introduce greater restrictions as well. So we need all sides to understand the vital importance for all of those civilians across Sudan of them being able to get basic food.
Martin Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome that the Foreign Secretary made reference to the West Bank in a statement, and others have made reference to the highest levels of attacks by settlers on Palestinians in the area. Will the government now consider taking the step that other European countries are taking of banning all trade with illegal settlements?
Well, he will know that my predecessor had already taken steps to halt the free trade discussions that were underway, and also to introduce sanctions for particular Israeli ministers who, as a result of some of the things that were happening in the West Bank. We need to ensure that as part of the peace process that is underway for Gaza now, it does include include a broader strategy for the West Bank. We want to see that happen as part of this peace process, as part of the work of the Board of Peace, and that is where we will be pursuing action.
Leila Moran.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really struck by the number of my constituents who, unprompted, will raise how weak international law seems to be at being able to hold those accountable, both in Gaza and also in Sudan and elsewhere, to account for the atrocities that they commit. This is a moment where we must bolster international law, not undermine it. So my question to this Foreign Secretary is, what has happened to the UK response to the ICJ advisory opinion on the occupation? She herself in her statement pointed out the stranglehold on banks. The Palestinian economy is on its knees and the illegal settlements continue to grow. This is not new. This has been happening for decades. What are we doing about it? We must abide by that opinion, don't we?
Well, she will know that is the advisory position from the ICJ. We take immensely seriously, and we will always look at any issues around international law, including advisory positions as well. And I think the greatest progress that we can make in terms of upholding international law right now is to ensure that this peace process for Gaza and also more broadly for the West Bank remains on track, that we can have a process towards a two-state solution. And we did make clear as part of our representations at the UN last night that all of this needs to be implemented in line with international law.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary spoke in her statement of Israeli restrictions strangling the Palestinian economy. These are not restrictions, they are the strategic attempts to undermine the viability of Palestine by illegal settlement, harassment, intimidation, murder and displacement of Palestinians from their land. Illegal settlements are still being fuelled by UK funds through trade in illegal goods and services that are produced there. This is completely unacceptable. So can I call on the Foreign Secretary to introduce a full ban on trade in goods from illegal settlements in the West Bank and further sanctions, extending the sanctions already introduced on organisations such as the Israel Land Fund to halt the flow of resources that are making this illegal activity possible?
Well, she's right to raise concern about the scale of the illegal settlements and also the way in which they have been expanding, but also the settler violence and, I would add to that, the withholding of funds to the Palestinian Authority that are also desperately needed. As I've said, we have already introduced the additional sanctions and also the restriction of the free trade agreement process. What we also need to do critically now, just as progress is being made on Gaza, is ensure that we have a broader process to include the plans for the West Bank and also for a two-state solution. We have continually raised this as part of the discussions and will continue to do so. It is important that the UN resolution does provide very clearly for that journey towards Palestinian statehood, for it to have the support of so many countries now, including the US, for that process is really important.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also welcome the passing of UN Resolution 2803? The Foreign Secretary mentions a two-state solution. Given the current Prime Minister of Israel doesn't seem particularly keen on a two-state solution, is that not a problem going forward for a permanent and lasting peace in the region? And on Sudan, isn't it the case that Russia are deliberately destabilizing Sudan? They have a self-interest through the Wagner or so-called Africa Corps group in Sudan, seeking to mine out gold and to take out oil. So what action can the British government take against those who are supplying the supply chain, getting those minerals out?
First, on the issue around the position of the Israeli government, we clearly strongly disagree with the Israeli Prime Minister on this. But I would just also say Israel has signed up to President Trump's 20-point plan. and it is important that the 20-point plan is implemented, which includes recognition of the importance of Palestinian statehood as well. And on the wider issue, we had the most evident overt nature of it with Russia vetoing the UK resolution on Sudan 12 months ago. And did that openly in the UN. He will know our continuing concern about Russia's engagement in a whole series of conflicts.
Paul.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the leading role the UK has played at the United Nations, both in trying to corral international action on the slaughter and the sexual violence in Sudan, but also on the international leadership we've shown in recognising the state of Palestine, an historic recognition as she's acknowledged. But can I thank her also for her personal commitment and her personal action in getting sick and injured Palestinian children to British hospitals? And can I ask her, can she tell us what more the UK can do, given the NHS expertise, in rebuilding healthcare in Gaza itself?
I strongly welcome my honourable friend's point. I went in Jordan to meet some of the doctors and the hospital that was helping with the transfer of the Medivac patients from Gaza through Jordan and here to the UK, to thank them for their support. We will continue to provide that support for the sick and injured children, and also we are working now on ways in which we can work with other neighbouring countries on how best to support the rebuilding of healthcare in Gaza. It's urgently needed, and it is an area where we have considerable expertise.
Shawkat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement, and I agree wholeheartedly in regarding to Sudan. Both sides must allow unhindered passage of humanitarian supply. However, I do not share her confidence in a US-led plan simply because the US is directly responsible and participant in war crimes and genocide happening in Gaza. They supplied over 10,000 tons of weapons. We have over 69,000 Palestinians killed. Does the Minister agree that this is nothing more than the imposition of an illegal occupation through coercive methods? And if this plan is adopted in its present form, it will be a mockery of the entire international legal system, and the United Nations will be acting in direct contradiction to the fundamental tenets of international law.
So let me just say to the honourable member, it's because of the US-led plan, widely supported, including by Qatar and Turkey and Egypt in the mediations, that we have a ceasefire in Gaza after 2 years of the most horrendous suffering. And President Trump's leadership, and they're determined to take this forward, is immensely important. I would also say that the UN resolution passed last night had the support of and has been welcomed by the Palestinian Authority, as well as by neighbouring Arab and Muslim states as well. That is important to maintain that unity. We will not get progress if we don't. It's important ultimately that we can deliver the two-state solution that this government is committed to, but we need everyone to work together to deliver that.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
My constituent was separated from her 5-year-old son during the horrors of displacement in Sudan. By sheer miracle, he made it to Saudi Arabia and is now staying there temporarily until the 1st of December, after which time he'll be forced to return to Sudan. What can the Foreign Secretary do to support families like this by way of evacuation pathways or humanitarian schemes?
I will happily look into the particular case for her constituent that she raises, but there is just an urgent need to get the humanitarian aid in, but also to get safety for those who are facing the most horrendous circumstances at the moment. She's also right, in a situation like this with such terrible conflict, families get separated and needs that support in order to be able to reunite.
Ben Lake.
Can I echo the Foreign Secretary's horror at the slaughter in Al-Fasher, and I share her concern that further atrocities will take place unless the international community can secure decisive intervention. With that in mind, can I ask the Foreign Secretary what response has there been to Friday's resolution from the warring parties, and how does the government, in conjunction with its international partners, intend to apply pressure upon them, not only to comply with the resolution but also international law?
I would say to him bluntly that the response from the warring parties has been wholly inadequate, and both sides are still refusing to deliver the ceasefire that we urgently need, even a humanitarian truce to let aid get in. There have been talk, there has been words put forward, but it is still completely inadequate given the scale of the humanitarian crisis that we face, and we will need continued pressure on all warring parties to act.
Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Foreign Secretary for the increased aid to Sudan and for confirming that no UK military equipment is known to have entered the conflict. As UN penholder on Sudan, what early discussions has the UK government had with the ICJ to ensure that those responsible for war crimes, especially against children and women, include the use of rape as a weapon of war, are brought to justice?
Well, I welcome the points that he's made, both about aid and also the restrictions on weapons as well. The approach that we have been taking, we earlier this year secured the renewal of the UN fact-finding mission, because the first stage is to ensure that there is evidence, and then most recently the Human Rights Council resolution on enabling a full UN investigation into those atrocities. It's crucial that we have those investigations so that the international courts can then hold people to account.
Ellie Chowns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement. Can I ask the Foreign Secretary, what further concrete steps will she take to increase pressure on Israel to allow humanitarian access for the 30+ humanitarian NGOs that have been blocked from delivering urgently needed relief, and pressure to stop Israel supporting settlement expansion and settler violence? And on Gaza, likewise, what new concrete actions will the government take to press those who are supporting the warring parties to stop the slaughter? And specifically, how will she persuade the UAE to put more pressure on the RSF to stop the slaughter?
So, just firstly, in terms of the steps for Israel and the allowing in the aid agencies, this is something that we have raised directly with the Israeli government, but also are raising directly through the CMCC, the coordinating committee, as part of the peace process. Because bear in mind, humanitarian aid and the flooding of Gaza with humanitarian aid was a crucial part of the 20-point plan and the ceasefire agreement that the Israeli government as well as Hamas have signed up to. So we need to ensure the implementation of that, as well as have direct pressure. And of course, we continue to raise the issues around the settlements as well. And then in terms of Sudan, again, we are continuing to engage with all of the nations that can have any possible influence on the warring parties in order to seek the peace we desperately need.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I welcome the news of the UN Security Resolution that was passed last night, the establishment of the International Stabilisation Force, and the arrangements that will follow for the Board of Peace and Palestinian Committee. But with a record 260 Israeli settler attacks on the West Bank taking place in October alone, can I ask the Foreign Secretary, does she agree with me that failure by Israel to punish such attacks is inconsistent with international law? And what further steps will she take to put pressure on Netanyahu and his government to stop these attacks?
I welcome the points my honourable friend made, because look, we obviously have the deep concerns about illegal settlements. They are illegal and should not be taking place, but also about this escalation of settler violence and the need for strong Israeli law enforcement action against the settler violence, as well as withdrawing from this approach to settlements as well.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I ask the Foreign Secretary in future not to link two statements together in one, so we can actually seriously examine one subject? And is she satisfied that the British arms and equipment sales that go to the United Arab Emirates don't end up in the hands of the RSF and don't end up as being part of the ghastly conflict in Sudan, which is fundamentally about people trying to grab the mineral resources of that country? And will she also assure us that there are no more British arms being sold to Israel, There is no more security sharing with Israel while it continues the illegal activities and the killings and the destruction, even since the ceasefire, so-called, of 1,500 buildings in Gaza, until such time as there is a real ceasefire and real peace.
Well, I'd say to the honourable member, I think look, he is right to highlight the importance of both Sudan and Gaza, and I felt it urgent to be able to bring both forward so that the House could have the update and to be able to respond. In terms of the he will know that we have a very strong restrictions in terms of arms sales. However, I also take this issue immensely seriously, and when there were some allegations that were raised about 3 pieces of equipment, including a seat belt, an engine part and a shooting target in Sudan, I have sought to ensure that thousands of licences that the UK has were reviewed, and in each of those cases there was no evidence of any of the parts that were identified or allegations made being covered by any UK licences, and I will continue to ensure, if there are ever any concerns or allegations raised, that there will be reviews of those licences in those circumstances, because it's immensely important that those restrictions are maintained. And I would also say to him, we are continuing with the restrictions on arms sales to Israel that my predecessor, the Deputy Prime Minister, has set out.
Mary Kelly Foy.
Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Foreign Secretary for her statement and her ongoing efforts to pursue peace. The rebuilding of Gaza must be Palestinian-led. Civil society and communities in Gaza have led the efforts on the front line in the face of 2 years of genocide and decades of Israeli siege, occupation and military violence. They are the ones, they are the leaders, the expert and the only ones who can determine their future. Does the Foreign Secretary accept that any initiative which bypasses Palestinians in Gaza in favour of externally imposed initiatives will always fail?
Well, we continue to take the view that Palestine must be led by Palestinians. It's immensely important. That's why it's important that the Palestinian Authority has supported and welcomed the resolution that was passed by the UN, that the resolution does provide for the transfer of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority alongside the West Bank. And we have also pressed for the Palestinian Committee to be set up as swiftly as possible as part of the transition arrangements, so that, again, that Palestinian voice and expertise is heard.
Final question, Sammy Wilson.
Speaker, and can I draw the House's attention to the entry in the Register of Interest? The Foreign Secretary is right. The peace is fragile in Gaza. Despite the fact that the Israeli government has agreed the 20-point peace plan, has agreed the UN resolution, and despite what she has said, has allowed over 20,000 truckloads of aid into Gaza since the ceasefire, while at the same time Hamas have refused to accept the UN resolution, continue to terrorise individuals in the Gaza territory, stockpile weapons, and have refused to give up their own weapons. What can she do to ensure that Israel is encouraged in its path towards peace and Hamas is discouraged in its resolution to continue the conflict?
Well, the honourable member rightly says that we have a 20-point plan. Both the Israeli government and Hamas signed up to it. It includes the decommissioning of weapons, something that the UK feels strongly about. It includes ensuring that Hamas does not play a role in the future governance of Gaza or of Palestine. And it includes the Israeli government ensuring that there is humanitarian aid is properly restored to Gaza, and also that the IDF can withdraw fully from Gaza as well. This is an ambitious 20-point plan. We know that, of course, there will be difficulties in implementing it, but we also know how incredibly important it is. And it is only through international community coming together, but also through the Israeli government and Hamas respecting the commitments that they have signed up to, that we will make progress and we will keep the desperately needed peace for Palestinians and Israelis alike.
Can I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement this afternoon? Point of order, Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst I'm sure the whole House is grateful for the Foreign Secretary coming here today and making this important statement, there does seem a pattern where the government are combining two very, very important subjects, as outlined by the Right Honourable Member for Islington North. These issues of a real concern to all of our constituents across the House, and I think they are worthy and they merit individual statements by the Foreign Secretary or somebody else on the Treasury bench. I seek your guidance, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order and for having given advance notice of it. He will, of course, be aware that the combination of statements is not a matter for the Chair. That is, the government determines statements, but I'm sure that the Foreign Secretary has heard his comments this afternoon. Point of order, Alicia Cairns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Scrutiny in this House requires timely and meaningful engagement by ministers with shadow front benches. Disappointingly, as Shadow Safeguarding Minister, responses from the member for Birmingham Yardley have been woeful. An average of 48 days per letter written to them. At worst, the longest response was 97 days. When I was chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee, my own government responded within 10 days to all letters received. So can I ask what advice you can kindly give on how we get responses as front benches in a dutifully and timely manner?
I thank the honourable member for her point of order. Members should receive timely responses to their correspondence with ministers, and it is disappointing to hear she has experienced such a significant delay. Ministers themselves are responsible for the timeliness of their response, and I hope the Treasury bench will have heard her concerns and pass them on to the relevant department. Honourable members may also wish to raise their concerns with the Leader of the House at business questions every Thursday. Point of order, Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I seek your advice. I currently have a number of written questions which are overdue for a response from DEFRA ministers. In total, these amount to 15 written questions, 14 of which were due by the end of October, and one response which was due on the 5th of November. 6 of my 15 questions were tabled as named day questions. As written questions are one of the ways in which members can hold the government to account, and with perhaps as many as 100,000 civil servants based in London, I would ask if you have any advice on what members can do when replies from departments are not forthcoming.
Can I thank the honourable member for his point of order, and he is right to say that written questions are an important way in which members may hold the government to account. As he will have heard me say earlier, ministers themselves are responsible for the timeliness of their responses, but I hope the Treasury bench have heard his concerns and will pass them on to the relevant department, I think in this case DEFRA. Both the Leader of the House and the Procedure Committee may also take an interest in these matters, and so the honourable member may wish to raise his concerns with them. Point of order, Helen Maguire.
On a point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker, during my remarks last week I stated the Queen Elizabeth Foundation for Disabled People had entered administration when this process hasn't begun yet. I also noted the loss of 48 NHS beds when these beds belong to the charity and are occupied by patients referred to them by the NHS. I apologise for any confusion and may I take this opportunity to once again share my disappointment that the Queen Elizabeth Foundation for Disabled People will be closing after 90 years of delivering its vital service.
Can I thank the honourable lady for advance notice of her point of order? She has corrected the record, as she did this time last week,